The chosen one. The heady fragrance of crushed moon petal and Lyra's own nervous energy saturated the air, a thick, sweet perfume. From a shadowed corner of their small chamber, Elara observed her sister, a familiar ache of admiration mingled with a quiet dread twisting in her gut. Lyra sat before a polished obsidian mirror, her nimble fingers meticulously braiding strands of lustrous auburn hair. Each movement was a testament to the evening's profound gravity. Tonight, Lyra would be presented, tonight, she might be chosen. Elara's own hands, usually occupied with mending needles or grinding herbs, felt curiously inert. Her breath hitched whenever Lyra's gaze darted toward the doorway, her vibrant green eyes holding a blend of anticipation and barely veiled apprehension. Lyra smoothed the silken folds of her undergarment, her brow furrowed in deep concentration. This wasn't mere vanity, it was a meticulous ritual, an acknowledgement of the immense honor awaiting her. She wasn't simply presenting herself, but their entire lineage to the Alpha. The weight of that responsibility was a palpable hum beneath the household's simmering excitement. "Elara, dear, could you fetch the silver comb?" Lyra's voice was softer than usual, a whisper of nerves betraying her customary confidence. Elara nodded, retrieving the intricately carved comb from its velvet pouch. Their fingers brushed as she passed it over, a fleeting warmth. Lyra offered a small, grateful smile, her eyes revealing a depth of emotion Elara rarely witnessed, a fleeting glimpse of the sister beneath the veneer of poise, a ghost of shared childhood secrets and scraped knees. Brenna entered then, her face radiant with an almost unbearable pride, yet etched with the subtle lines of a mother's anxiety. She carried the ceremonial gown, a breathtaking cascade of ivory silk embroidered with shimmering silver threads depicting the moon's phases. The fabric seemed to pulse with an inner light in the chamber's dimness, starlight made manifest. "My beautiful girl," Brenna murmured, her voice thick with emotion, as she helped Lyra rise. The gown settled around Lyra like a second skin, accentuating her lithe figure, making her appear taller, more ethereal. The low neckline revealed the delicate curve of her collarbones, a single polished moonstone resting against her skin on a slender chain. "You look like a dream, Lyra," Elara managed, her voice a little breathless, the words feeling utterly inadequate against the grandeur before her. Lyra truly seemed to have stepped from a myth. Brenna adjusted a fold, her hands trembling slightly. "The Alpha will surely be captivated. You honor us all, Lyra. Your father will swell with pride." Her gaze swept over Lyra, assessing, approving, yet a flicker of her own youthful hopes and fears danced in her eyes, a mother's blessing, a silent passing of the torch. Lyra met her mother's gaze, a flash of determination hardening her features. "I will make you proud, mother." Her chin lifted, a subtle shift from nervous anticipation to resolute purpose. She was ready. A low growl, barely audible but vibrating through the floorboards, resonated through the chamber. It was Gareth, their father, signaling his presence at the den's entrance. His protective instincts were on full alert. No one was to disturb the preparations. No errant scent or sound was to mar the sacred space before the Alpha's arrival. He was their shield, their quiet guardian, ensuring everything was perfect, beyond reproach. Elara envisioned him outside, his broad shoulders filling the doorway, his twilight-colored eyes scanning the forest for any intrusion. He was a sentinel, his presence a comforting anchor in the rising tide of nervous excitement, his unwavering support a silent promise that, no matter the outcome, their family would remain strong. The air grew heavy with a new scent, a subtle, musky aroma speaking of power and dominance. It was the Alpha's scent, distinct and undeniable, carried on the soft evening breeze. Elara's heart began to hammer against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped within her chest. This was it. The moment had arrived. She watched as Lyra took a deep, steadying breath, her eyes closing for a brief moment before opening again, bright and resolute. Brenna gave Lyra's hand a final squeeze, a silent prayer passing between them. As Lyra turned to walk towards the entrance, towards her destiny, Elara felt that familiar sense of being overlooked, of blending into the shadows. It wasn't resentment, not truly. More like a resigned acceptance. Lyra was the sun, drawing all eyes, all admiration. Ilara was the moon, quiet and reflective, present but not overtly seen. She smoothed the simple fabric of her own dress, a stark contrast to Lyra's shimmering gown. A small, knowing sigh escaped her lips. Their paths were different, had always been different. As the Alpha's powerful presence drew nearer, filling the den with its magnetic pull, Ilara braced herself for the inevitable, for the moment Lyra would step forward, and the future would begin. Anticipations hold. The crisp evening air hummed with a nervous energy that was almost palpable. Torches, freshly lit, flickered along the perimeter of the village, casting dancing shadows that made familiar faces seem otherworldly. A low murmur, a blend of hushed excitement and an underlying tremor of fear, rippled through the gathering crowds. Children, usually boisterous, clung to their parents' legs, their wide eyes reflecting the flickering flames and the anxious expressions around them. Tonight was not just another moon ceremony, tonight, the Alpha was coming. Ilara, her usually nimble fingers trembling, meticulously arranged wild berries on a platter of roasted venison. The rich, gamey scent mingled with the aroma of freshly baked bread and fragrant herbs, but Ilara barely registered the appetizing smells. Her focus was solely on not dropping the delicate fruit, each berry a tiny, crimson orb that seemed to mock her unsteady grip. Brenna, her brow furrowed with a mixture of pride and apprehension, moved with efficient grace around the communal kitchen, directing other women with sharp, clipped instructions. More honey cakes, Marin. The Alpha prefers them lightly glazed, Brenna commanded, her voice betraying a tension she tried to mask with authority. To Ilara, she offered a softer, though still strained, tone. Careful with those, my sweet. They're for the Alpha's personal table. Ilara nodded, her throat tight. She imagined Lyra, somewhere in their small cottage, being fussed over by Gareth, perhaps having her intricate braids retightened for the 10th time. Lyra would be radiating confidence, though Ilara knew her sister would be battling her own quiet anxieties. Lyra was always the picture of grace, the one destined for such a moment. Ilara, on the other hand, felt clumsy and insignificant, a shadow flitting at the edges of a brilliant light. A gust of wind rustled through the village, carrying with it a faint, earthy scent, a blend of pine needles, damp soil, and something wilder, deeper. It was a scent that prickled the hairs on Ilara's arms, a primal warning that tightened her stomach into a knot. She glanced at the other women, their movements had subtly slowed, their eyes darting towards the village entrance. The low murmur had died down, replaced by a profound silence that seemed to swallow the sounds of the crackling fires. "He's close," whispered an older woman, her voice barely audible. Ilara's heart hammered against her ribs. She pressed a hand to her chest, as if to physically quell the frantic rhythm. She pictured the Alpha, a creature of immense power and ancient lineage, a being capable of both terrifying wrath and benevolent protection. She had only ever seen him from afar during the annual gatherings, a hulking figure cloaked in thick furs, his presence radiating an aura that demanded absolute deference. Tonight, he would be in their homes, among them, choosing. Brenna moved swiftly to Ilara's side, her hand briefly resting on her daughter's shoulder. "Breathe, child. Everything must be perfect. For Lyra. For us." Her mother's words, meant to reassure, only amplified Ilara's internal pressure. She wanted to do right by Lyra, to ensure her sister's night was flawless, but her own fear was a cold, creeping sensation. From the distance, a sound began to rise, faint at first, then growing in intensity. It wasn't the rustling of leaves or the hoot of an owl. It was a deep, guttural howl that seemed to tear through the fabric of the night. It pulsed with raw power, a sound that resonated not just in the air, but in Ilara's very bones. It was the Alpha's call, a primal declaration of his arrival. A collective gasp rippled through the village. Fear, sharp and undeniable, painted itself across every face. Yet, interwoven with that fear was a spark of something else, awe, reverence, and a strange, almost intoxicating thrill. This was their protector, their leader, the embodiment of their strength. Elara felt the platter of berries waver in her hands. Her knees felt weak, threatening to buckle. She closed her eyes for a fleeting second, picturing Lyra's composed face, her sister's unwavering determination. If Lyra could face him with courage, Elara reasoned, she could at least hold steady a platter of fruit. She took a deep, shuddering breath, the scent of pine and wildness now undeniably stronger, closer. The Alpha was here. The unexpected gaze. The collective breath of the village hitched. Outside, the heavy thud of paws, not one but several, vibrated through the very stones of their hearth. Each beat was a drum against Elara's ribs, mirroring the frantic rhythm of her heart. Then, with a splintering crack that echoed like thunder, the sturdy oak door of their home burst inward. A gust of frigid night air, thick with the scent of pine and something wild, swept through the room, extinguishing the flickering candles on the altar table. Silence descended, a heavy shroud woven from fear and reverence. The remaining light, cast by the hearth's struggling embers, struggled to pierce the sudden gloom. From the gaping maw of their doorway, a colossal silhouette filled the frame. Alpha Thorn. He wasn't merely a man, he was a force of nature given form. His height was prodigious, shoulders broad as an ox, and his frame muscled with an undeniable power that seemed to strain the very fabric of his dark, ceremonial tunic. His presence was a palpable weight, pressing down on every soul present, demanding submission. Brenna, who had been fussing with Lyra's hair, gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Gareth, usually unshakable, straightened imperceptibly, his calloused hands clenching at his sides. Lyra, ever poised, merely lowered her gaze, a picture of demure grace, yet Elara could sense the tremor in her sister's usually steady breathing. Then, the Alpha moved. He strode into the room with an unhurried, predatory grace, his boots making no sound on the packed earth floor. The air crackled with an energy that was both terrifying and mesmerizing. As he drew closer, the faint light of the hearth caught his eyes. They were not merely golden, they were molten pools, flecked with darker amber, radiating an ancient, knowing intelligence that seemed to pierce through the very soul. They scanned the room, lingering for a moment on the hushed faces of the family. Elara felt her breath catch. His gaze, an almost physical touch, swept past Brenna, past Gareth, and then, inexorably, it slid over Lyra. Lyra, who stood radiant in her white gown, her dark hair a shimmering cascade, her beauty undeniable. Elara expected his eyes to linger, to recognize the prepared elegance, the hopeful anticipation. She braced herself for the inevitable, for the Alpha's discerning assessment of her sister's worthiness. But he didn't stop. His golden gaze, sharp as a hawk's, continued its journey. It bypassed Lyra entirely, not even a flicker of acknowledgement. Instead, it moved across the room, past the corner where Elara was shrinking against the wall, clutching the wooden bowl of untouched berries. It was a slow, deliberate movement, like a predator tracking its prey. And then, those impossibly golden eyes landed on her. Elara froze. The berries in her bowl suddenly felt like lead, and her fingers, numb with shock, threatened to drop them. The Alpha's gaze was not a fleeting glance, it was an intense, unwavering focus, as though she were the only person in the room. It was a gaze that saw not just her physical form, but something deeper, something she couldn't articulate, something that made her feel utterly exposed and yet, strangely, seen. A ripple of hushed murmurs spread through the small gathering of villagers who had crowded at the doorway, their expressions a mixture of confusion and disbelief. Brenna's hand dropped from her mouth, her face a mask of bewilderment, her eyes darting between Thorn and Elara. Lyra, too, visibly stiffened, her head lifting slightly, a faint frown creasing her perfect brow. Her usual confidence wavered, replaced by a flicker of wounded pride. The Alpha took another step, then another, his eyes never leaving Elara's. The air grew thick with unspoken questions, with the weight of tradition being upended. Ilara's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. She couldn't look away from those piercing golden eyes, even as a terrifying realization began to dawn. This was not about Lyra. This was about her. And for the first time in her life, Ilara felt the full, terrifying weight of the Alpha's unexpected gaze. It was a gaze that promised to change everything. A hand reaches out. Lyra, ever graceful, glided forward, her silken dress rustling like wind through dry leaves. A practiced smile, one that had charmed many a suitor, bloomed on her lips. Alpha Thorn, she began, her voice a melodic whisper, it is an honor to welcome you to our home. We have prepared much to show you this evening. She extended a hand, palm up, a subtle invitation, her gaze unwavering, confident in the age-old custom. But the Alpha's golden eyes, molten gold in the dim light, did not waver from their fixed point. He did not acknowledge Lyra's greeting, nor the delicate hand offered to him. Instead, his imposing form, cloaked in shadowed fur, shifted, taking another deliberate step. It was a step not towards the vibrant Lyra, but past her, towards the corner where Ilara stood, a forgotten shadow in the flickering hearth light. A tremor, quick and sharp, ran through Brenna. Her breath caught, a silent gasp trapped in her throat. Gareth's hand, resting on the hilt of his hunting knife, tightened imperceptibly. The air in the small cottage, already thick with the scent of pine and anticipation, now crackled with an unspoken tension, an electric charge that threatened to shatter the carefully constructed peace. Ilara, startled by the Alpha's unwavering focus, felt a flush creep up her neck. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. She had been observing, as always, the subtle shifts in the Alpha's expression, the way his broad shoulders spoke of immense power. She had expected to fade into the background, to witness the familiar dance of courtship and acceptance. She was not meant to be seen. The Alpha's gaze, intense and unyielding, pinned her. It was a look that stripped away pretense, that saw past the worn fabric of her dress, past the faint dust from her chores, and seemed to pierce directly into the core of her being. She felt exposed, vulnerable, yet strangely, a flicker of something else, something akin to curiosity, stirred within her. A low growl, deep and resonant, rumbled in Alpha Thorn's chest. It wasn't a sound of aggression, but one of raw, undeniable recognition. It vibrated through the floorboards, through the very air, settling deep in Ilara's bones. Lyra froze, her outstretched hand still suspended in the air, her perfect smile faltering, replaced by a bewildered frown. Her eyes, usually so bright with self-assurance, now held a dawning confusion, then a flicker of hurt. Slowly, deliberately, Alpha Thorn extended his own hand. It was large, the fingers thick and strong, the knuckles scarred from battles unknown. It moved with a primal grace, not reaching for her face, nor her shoulder, but directly for her trembling hand. Ilara, rooted to the spot, watched it approach as if in a dream. Her own hands, usually busy with mending or tending to the garden, felt suddenly small and clumsy. When his fingers closed around hers, it was gentle, yet undeniably firm. The warmth that radiated from his touch was startling, an unexpected current that coursed through her arm, up to her shoulder, and spread through her chest. It was a warmth that chased away the chill of the evening and the cold dread that had begun to settle in her stomach. His thumb brushed lightly over her knuckles, a feather-light touch that sent shivers down her spine, not of fear, but of an unsettling, unfamiliar sensation. Gareth took a half-step forward, his eyes narrowed, a silent question in their depths. Brenna clutched her apron, her knuckles white. Lyra's jaw tightened, her perfect composure finally cracking. The unspoken words hung heavy in the air, this was not how it was supposed to go. This was not the chosen one. But Alpha Thorn, oblivious to the shockwaves he had unleashed, held Ilara's hand, his gaze still locked with hers. In that moment, the world outside the small cottage seemed to fade, leaving only the two of them, connected by an unexpected touch, a silent declaration that defied all expectations and shattered the carefully laid plans. Ilara, for the first time in her life, was not an afterthought. She was seen. And the weight of that recognition, the sudden, bewildering shift in her destiny, settled upon her with the force of a tidal wave. The stolen ceremony. Ilara's world, which had always been a muted canvas of greens and browns, suddenly exploded into a kaleidoscope of impossible brilliance. Her hand, small and calloused from countless hours spent tending to the garden, felt dwarfed within alpha thorns. His grip was firm, almost possessive, and an unfamiliar warmth spread through her veins, chasing away the chill of her usual invisibility. Her mind, usually so clear and organized in its quiet observations, spun like a top caught in a hurricane. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be happening. She was Ilara, the forgotten shadow, not the radiant Lyra, not the one destined for such a moment. The scent of pine and rain, Thorn's unique essence, now enveloped her, making her dizzy. Brenna, who moments before had been a bustling whirlwind of nervous energy, now stood utterly still, her hands hovering in the air as if caught mid-gesture. Her meticulously styled hair, usually a testament to her pride, seemed to droop. Her eyes, wide with an almost comical disbelief, darted from Thorn to Ilara, then to the empty space where her carefully prepared Lyra should have been. Gareth, ever the stoic, had his jaw clenched so tightly that a muscle pulsed in his temple. His broad shoulders, typically radiating an immovable strength, seemed to sag. He uttered no sound, but the raw shock etched on his face spoke volumes. It was as if the very air had been sucked from their lungs, leaving them gasping in a silent, collective bewilderment. Alpha Thorn, oblivious to the tableau of stunned silence and shattered expectations he had created, merely inclined his head slightly towards the family. His gaze, briefly sweeping over Brenna and Gareth, held no apology, only a quiet, unyielding resolve. "We depart," he stated, his voice a low rumble that seemed to reverberate through the floorboards. Then, with a gentle but unmistakable pull, he began to lead Ilara towards the front door. Ilara stumbled, her simple dress rustling around her legs. Her eyes, wide and bewildered, sought out Lyra's. Her sister, her beautiful, vibrant Lyra, stood frozen, a statue carved from heartbreak. The carefully arranged wildflowers in her hair seemed to mock her, a cruel crown on a dethroned queen. Tears, bright and glistening, tracked paths down Lyra's flawless cheeks, mirroring the shattered fragments of her dreams. Her lips trembled, forming Ilara's name, but no sound escaped. The sight twisted something deep within Ilara, a sharp pang of guilt that momentarily eclipsed her own terror and confusion. This was wrong. This was Lyra's moment, Lyra's destiny. Yet, Thorn's grip remained firm, leading her onward, out of the familiar warmth of their home and into the unknown. As they stepped across the threshold, the low murmur of the gathered villagers swelled, then quickly died into a stunned hush. Faces, previously alight with anticipation for Lyra's grand exit, now contorted into expressions of confusion, curiosity, and outright shock. Children, who had been excitedly pointing, dropped their hands, their eyes mirroring the bewilderment of their parents. Ilara could feel the weight of their collective gaze, 1,000 invisible threads pulling at her, dissecting her. She felt exposed, vulnerable, like a creature plucked from the shadows and thrust into the harsh glare of an unexpected spotlight. Thorn, however, walked with an unhurried confidence, his presence radiating an undeniable authority that silenced any potential whispers of dissent. He did not glance at the crowd, his focus solely on Ilara, on guiding her through the throng. His hand, still firmly clasped around hers, was a beacon, a tether in the storm of her disoriented senses. The scent of the outside world, a mix of damp earth, distant wood smoke, and the unique musk of the gathered pack, flooded her. It was overwhelming, a stark contrast to the quiet, contained world she had always known. She risked another glance back at her family. Brenna had finally found her voice, a strangled gasp that was quickly hushed by Gareth's steadying hand on her arm. Lyra, her head bowed now, remained motionless in the doorway, a figure of profound sorrow against the backdrop of their once happy home. The image burned into Ilara's mind, a painful brand that would surely last forever. She knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that nothing would ever be the same. The ceremony, meant for another, had been irrevocably stolen, and she was the unwitting thief. Whispers and doubts. The stunned silence, thick as the gathering dusk, shattered into 1,000 whispers as Thorn's powerful, yet surprisingly gentle, hand settled on Alara's back, guiding her forward. Each step away from the threshold felt like a deepening chasm, severing her from the life she had known. The dirt path, once a familiar comfort, now felt alien, a runway into an unknown destiny. Her gaze snagged on the villagers, their faces, usually alight with ceremonial joy, now etched with bewildered curiosity. Eyes wide, lips parted in silent gasps or hushed murmurs, they caught fragments of her name, or perhaps Lyra's, distorted by collective shock. Near the baker's stall, a woman known for her quick smile now covered her mouth with a trembling hand, her eyes wide with a blend of pity and disbelief. Younger men, who once teased Alara good-naturedly, now stared with a near-reverent awe, their playful expressions replaced by something akin to fear. The cumulative weight of their gazes pressed down, a physical burden on her shoulders. Guilt gnawed, a sharp, bitter taste. This was Lyra's moment, Lyra's designated path. Alara, always a shadow in her sister's vibrant light, was now inexplicably drawn into the sun. Her stomach churned with a nauseating cocktail of shame and a strange, bewildering wonder. Thorn's hand, though firm, radiated a warmth that seeped through her simple tunic, a grounding presence amidst the swirling chaos of her thoughts. He moved with unshakable resolve, his broad shoulders carving a path through the throng, seemingly oblivious to the seismic shift he had just orchestrated. She yearned to pull away, to scream that it was all a mistake, that she wasn't the intended one. But a primal instinct, a silent command from Thorn's unwavering grip, compelled her onward. He was the Alpha, his will, absolute. Fear tightened its icy grip around her heart. What fate awaited her? What expectations would descend upon her, the one who found solace in quiet corners, now thrust onto life's grandest stage? Yet, beneath the fear and overwhelming guilt, a tiny, defiant spark of curiosity flickered. The world, once confined and predictable, now stretched out before her, vast and uncharted. A nascent power, not her own but inherited through Thorn's touch, tingled in her veins, a sensation both terrifying and exhilarating. As Thorn guided her past the last of the gaping villagers and toward the winding path leading to the Alpha's den, Alara stole a glance back. Her gaze landed on the doorway of her family home, where Lyra stood frozen, a statue carved from heartbreak. Lyra's face, usually so radiant and confident, was a mask of profound sorrow, her eyes wide and glistening with unshed tears. The vibrant green ceremonial dress, meant for a bride, now seemed to mock her, its rich fabric a stark contrast to the despair etched on her features. Lyra's hand pressed against the doorframe, knuckles white, as if holding herself upright. A fresh wave of guilt washed over Alara, so potent it threatened to buckle her knees. She longed to run back, to embrace her sister, to apologize for a fate she hadn't chosen but had nonetheless accepted. But Thorn's grip tightened almost imperceptibly, a silent anchor. He didn't look back, his focus unwavering as he led her further away, severing the last thread connecting her to her old life. The distance between them grew with every step, Lyra's figure shrinking until she was just a distant, heartbreaking silhouette against the setting sun. The whispers of the villagers faded behind them, replaced by the rustle of leaves and the distant call of a night bird. Alara's mind raced, a dizzying kaleidoscope of images, Lyra's broken face, Thorn's stern profile, the shocked faces of the village elders. She was no longer just Alara, the quiet sister. She was something else, something new, terrifying, and exhilarating. The path ahead was dark, yet the strange wonder that had begun to bloom in her chest refused to be extinguished. It pulsed with a quiet, undeniable beat, pulling her forward into an uncertain future. The path unfolds. The forest, once a familiar comfort, now felt like a labyrinth. Each rustle of leaves, each snap of a twig beneath Thorn's heavy boots, resonated with the terrifying finality of her old life crumbling. He moved with a silent, relentless grace, his hand a warm, unyielding weight at the small of her back, guiding her deeper into the whispering woods. Elara stumbled occasionally, her mind still reeling from the sudden, violent uprooting. The faces of the villagers, etched with shock and confusion, flickered behind her eyes, none more prominent than Lyra's, a mask of bewildered betrayal. Guilt gnawed at her, a bitter taste in her mouth. This wasn't hers. This was Lyra's destiny, Lyra's glory. Yet, beneath the crushing weight of unworthiness, a strange, nascent curiosity stirred. What was this path Thorn had chosen for her? What lay beyond the familiar boundaries of her village life, beyond the shadows of her sister's brilliance? The air grew cooler, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant wood smoke. The trees began to thin, revealing a soft, ethereal glow filtering through the canopy. Thorn paused, his grip tightening imperceptibly, a silent command for her to stop. He turned, his gaze, usually so unreadable, holding a flicker of something she couldn't quite decipher, expectation? Determination? He released her, stepping back, and the sudden absence of his touch left her feeling strangely exposed, adrift. Before them, the trees parted to reveal a wide, circular clearing. The grass here was impossibly green, almost luminescent under the filtered moonlight. Ancient stones, rough-hewn and moss-covered, formed a silent ring at the clearing's edge, their dark surfaces gleaming with dew. In the very center, a single, towering oak stood sentinel, its gnarled branches reaching towards the heavens like supplicating arms. The air here hummed with an almost palpable energy, a sense of ancient power that made the hairs on Elara's arms prickle. This wasn't just a place, it was the heart of something profound. Elara's breath hitched. This was the ceremonial clearing, the sacred ground where the Alpha affirmed his chosen mate before the ancestors, before the pack. Lyra had spoken of it in hushed, reverent tones, imagining the moment, the reverence, the sheer power of it. Elara had always pictured herself a silent observer, part of the respectful crowd, never the one standing on the hallowed ground itself. A shiver, part fear, part exhilarating wonder, traced its way down her spine. The weight of the moment pressed in, suffocating and sublime. She was not Lyra. She was Elara, the quiet sister, the one who blended into the background. And yet, here she was, on the precipice of something immense, something entirely unforeseen. Thorn moved, his powerful stride carrying him towards the center of the clearing, towards the ancient oak. He didn't look back, simply moved with the conviction of a force of nature. Elara hesitated, her feet rooted to the spot where the forest yielded to the clearing. Every fiber of her being screamed for her to turn back, to flee into the familiar shadows, to tell him he had made a mistake. But another, deeper instinct, a whisper of courage she hadn't known she possessed, urged her forward. This was it. The point of no return. With a deep, shaky breath, Elara stepped onto the hallowed ground. The grass beneath her worn boots felt impossibly soft, cushioning her steps. The air, cooler here, tasted of pine and something else, ozone, perhaps, or raw power. The ring of stones seemed to hum, their ancient energy resonating through the soles of her feet. As she drew closer to Thorn, who stood with his back to her, facing the great oak, she felt a profound shift within herself. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach, but it was now interwoven with a strange, budding awe. This wasn't just about a mate, or a ceremony. This was about something far older, far grander. She was no longer just Elara, the sister. She was Elara, standing on sacred ground, about to embark on a path she never knew existed, a path chosen for her by the Alpha himself. The unknown stretched before her, vast and terrifying, but also shimmering with a promise she couldn't quite name. Lyra's despair. The familiar scent of wood smoke and dried herbs, usually a comforting embrace, now felt like a suffocating shroud as Lyra stumbled back into the cottage. The air, thick with unspoken questions, prickled against her skin. Her hands, still trembling, clutched at the rough-spun fabric of her gown, a garment chosen with such meticulous care for a destiny that had, in a single, brutal moment, been snatched away. The warmth of the hearth, a beacon on colder nights, offered no solace. Brenna, her face a canvas of concern and bewilderment, rushed forward, her usually graceful movements now jerky with agitation. "Lyra, my darling, what happened? Where is Alara? And the Alpha?" Her voice, usually a gentle murmur, was laced with a frantic edge. Lyra's carefully constructed composure shattered. A strangled sob tore from her throat, raw and guttural, shaking her entire frame. He didn't choose me, Mother." The words were a bitter, burning ash in her mouth. "He chose her. Alara. He took Alara to the clearing." Brenna gasped, a hand flying to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. "Alara? But that's impossible. You were the one, Lyra. Everyone knew it. You were destined for him." Her gaze darted to the empty doorway, as if expecting the Alpha to stride back in and rectify his mistake. Lyra collapsed onto the worn wooden bench by the window, the faded floral cushion doing little to soften the impact. Tears, hot and furious, streamed down her face, blurring the familiar outlines of the cottage. "Why, Mother? Why would he do this? Was I not beautiful enough? Not strong enough? Did I do something wrong?" Her voice cracked, dissolving into a broken whimper. The confidence that usually radiated from her, bright and unwavering, had been extinguished, leaving behind only a hollow ache. Gareth, who had been standing by the hearth, a silent, imposing figure, finally moved. His broad shoulders, usually relaxed, were now rigid with tension. He walked towards Lyra, his steps heavy, his face a mask of grim determination. He reached out, his calloused hand resting briefly on her shaking shoulder, a rare, almost imperceptible gesture of comfort. "Lyra, my daughter, you are more than enough. You are a credit to this family, to our pack." His voice was deep, resonating with an unspoken promise of protection. This makes no sense." Brenna knelt beside Lyra, pulling her into a tight embrace, stroking her hair. "Oh, my poor girl. My beautiful Lyra. It's not your fault, my love. It can't be." Her own eyes, usually sparkling with life, were now clouded with a deep-seated worry. The carefully constructed future she had envisioned for her eldest, for her family, had crumbled into dust. The shame of it, the utter bewilderment, was a cold knot in her stomach. What would the pack say? How would they ever explain this unprecedented rejection? But why Alara? Lyra choked out, pulling back from her mother's embrace, her gaze still fixed on the doorway where her sister had vanished. She's always been so quiet. So unassuming. She never sought attention. She never wanted this. The injustice of it, the sheer absurdity, gnawed at her. Gareth's jaw tightened. He paced a short circuit in the small cottage, his gaze fixed on the floorboards, as if seeking answers in the grain of the wood. "The Alpha's choice is absolute," he murmured, more to himself than to them. "But it is not without reason. Thorn is a just leader, albeit a mysterious one. There must be a purpose behind this. A design we cannot yet see." He stopped, turning to face his wife and daughter, his eyes holding a steely resolve. "I will not stand by and let this riddle remain unsolved. I will go to the Alpha. I will demand an explanation. Not for Alara's sake, but for yours, Lyra. For our family's honor." Brenna looked up at her husband, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and admiration. "Gareth, be careful. You cannot challenge the Alpha's decision lightly." "I am not challenging his decision, Brenna," Gareth stated, his voice firm. "I am seeking understanding. For Lyra's peace. For our family's standing." He glanced at Lyra, who was still weeping silently, her face buried in her hands. The image of his proud, vibrant daughter reduced to such despair stirred a powerful, protective instinct within him. No daughter of mine will be left to wonder if she was found wanting. Not when she is so clearly worthy. Lyra, though still consumed by her grief, felt a flicker of warmth, a fragile ember of hope, at her father's words. He wouldn't let this go. He would find out why. But even that small comfort couldn't erase the searing pain of rejection, the haunting image of Alara, wide-eyed and bewildered, being led away by the Alpha, leaving Lyra behind in the wreckage of her shattered dreams. The cottage, once a sanctuary, now felt like a prison, echoing with the silence of her unchosen fate. A new beginning. A potent hum of anticipation thickened the air in the ceremonial clearing, vibrating through ancient trees and settling deep in Alara's bones. Tall, flickering torches cast dancing shadows, transforming the familiar landscape into something both sacred and unsettling. A sea of pack members watched from the periphery, their collective gaze a heavy weight on her shoulders. She stood on a raised stone platform, the rough surface cool beneath her bare feet, a simple white tunic clinging to her trembling form. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat threatening to drown out the elder's low chant. Then, he emerged. Alpha Thorn. He moved with quiet authority, each deliberate step commanding the space around him. Moonlight glinted off the intricate silver markings etched into his exposed chest, symbols of lineage and power. His eyes, the color of deep forest moss, swept over the gathered pack before settling on her. A shiver, not entirely born of fear, traced its way down Alara's spine. Up close, he was even more imposing, a force of nature contained within a powerful frame. As he ascended the platform steps, his gaze remained unwavering. The distinct scent of pine and rich earth, unmistakably his, enveloped her, strangely comforting amidst her chaotic emotions. He stopped before her, close enough for her to feel the radiating warmth of his body, the subtle pull of his presence. Taller than she remembered, his broad shoulders cast her in his shadow. Alara, his voice rumbled low, resonating with an authority that brooked no argument. It was the first time he had spoken her name directly, and the sound, laced with his deep timbre, sent an unexpected jolt through her. "Are you ready to pledge yourself to this pack, and to me, as your alpha?" Her throat felt parched, her tongue thick. This was it, the moment her life would irrevocably change. The persistent knot of guilt in her stomach tightened. Lyra's devastated face flashed in her mind, a stark contrast to the clearing's reverent silence. But then, she met Thorn's gaze. There was no judgment, no pity, only a steady intensity that demanded an answer. A flicker of something else, too, an unspoken expectation, perhaps a challenge. She took a shaky breath, striving to steady her racing pulse. "I am ready, Alpha Thorn," she managed, her voice a mere whisper, yet it carried in the hushed air. He nodded slowly, a subtle acknowledgement. Then, with practiced grace, he extended his hand. His palm was calloused, strong, and warm. Hesitantly, she placed her smaller hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, a firm, possessive grip that sent a spark through her. It wasn't unpleasant, not precisely. It was electric. A current of energy seemed to flow from him, awakening something dormant within her own spirit. He led her to the platform center, where a shallow basin of ancient stone held shimmering water. The elders began a new chant, deeper, more guttural, a prayer to the moon goddess for fertility and strength. Thorn dipped his fingers into the water, then gently, reverently, traced a line along her jaw, down her neck, and across her collarbone. The water was cool against her skin, but where his fingers touched, a warmth bloomed, spreading outwards. As his thumb brushed over the pulse point at her throat, a peculiar sensation blossomed in her chest, a faint thrumming, a resonance that echoed her own heartbeat. It was as if, for the first time, she was truly aware of him, not just as the formidable alpha, but as an individual whose presence resonated with her own. A strange sense of belonging began to unfurl within her, a quiet understanding that this connection, unforeseen and unplanned, was real. He leaned in slightly, his scent intensifying, his breath warm on her ear. This bond, he murmured, his voice low, for her ears only, is not merely of duty, Ilara. It is of spirit. Do you feel it? Her eyes fluttered closed for a moment, senses overwhelmed. She did feel it. A nascent connection, fragile yet potent, was weaving itself between them. It was a thread of curiosity, of burgeoning trust, and an undeniable thrill for the unknown path stretching before her. She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze once more, and in their depths, she saw a reflection of her own dawning wonder. This new beginning, stolen and unexpected, was calling to her. Dawn of a new era. The first silver slivers of dawn pierced the heavy drapes, striping the unfamiliar ceiling. Ilara blinked, disentangling herself from dreams of ancient trees and a potent, silent presence. Then, memory surged, the ritual, the water, Thorn's indelible mark on her soul, a link both terrifying and thrilling. She was Alpha Thorn's mate. The realization resonated deep within her, a fundamental recalibration of her identity. She stretched, her muscles a little stiff from yesterday's emotional maelstrom. The bed was immense, a lavish expanse quite unlike anything she'd known, the sheets a whisper of silk against her skin. A soft rustle beside her drew her gaze to Thorn, lying on his back, eyes still closed, his formidable jaw softened by sleep. The scar tracing his temple seemed less stark now, a quiet testament to past conflicts. She studied him, this man who had irrevocably rerouted her destiny, seeking answers in his serene repose. He was an enigma, a force of nature, and now, he was hers. The thought sent a peculiar shiver down her spine, not fear, but a nascent power, a burgeoning sense of belonging. As if sensing her scrutiny, Thorn's eyes fluttered open, storm-cloud gray, intense even in their waking softness. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. "Good morning, Ilara," he rumbled, a low vibration that seemed to course through her. "Good morning, Alpha Thorn," she replied, the title feeling oddly formal in the intimate space. He sat up, leaning against the carved headboard, his bare chest a landscape of chiseled muscle. "Just Thorn, in here," he corrected gently, his gaze unwavering. "Or whatever you wish to call me." He reached out, his large hand cupping her cheek, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. The touch was exquisitely light, yet it sent a jolt of warmth through her. "Are you well? Did you sleep?" I did," Ilara managed, surprised by the tenderness in his expression. This was a different man than the stoic, unyielding Alpha she knew, softer, more personal. "It's all still very new." "It will be," he affirmed, his voice laced with understanding. "But you are not alone in this. We are in this together." He squeezed her hand, a silent vow. "Today marks a fresh beginning for us both, and for the pack. There will be trials, but also immense strength. You possess more of it than you realize." Later, clad in a simple tunic and trousers provided by the pack's attendants, garments far more refined than her own worn dresses, Ilara found herself in the main hall. The room hummed with the muted cadence of morning activity. Pack members moved with quiet deference, their glances occasionally flickering her way, a blend of curiosity and tentative respect. Brenna, her mother, was already there, directing servants with a renewed, almost frantic energy. Gareth, her father, stood by the massive hearth, his usual stern expression softened by a flicker of pride as he watched Ilara. Lyra, however, was conspicuously absent. Ilara felt a pang of guilt, a familiar ache concerning her sister's reaction. The weight of her new position was heavy, not merely from the pack's expectations, but from the unspoken rift it had carved within her family. As Ilara took her place at the head table, beside Thorn, the room gradually hushed. A palpable shift in the atmosphere descended. The pack elders, their faces etched with the wisdom of generations, approached. Elder Maeve, her silver braids gleaming, was the first to speak. "Alpha Thorn, Alpha Ilara," she began, her voice steady and resonant. The spirits have chosen, and we honor their decree. The moon has blessed this union, and we accept our new alpha female. Her gaze, ancient and piercing, met Elara's. The path ahead will be arduous, but your heart is true. Lead us with wisdom and kindness, as is your nature. Elara felt a lump form in her throat. To be acknowledged, to be accepted by these revered figures, was an immense relief. She looked at Thorn, who offered a subtle nod of encouragement. I will do my best, she promised, her voice a little shaky but firm. I will learn, and I will serve the pack with all my being. Elder Ronan, a formidable man whose eyes missed nothing, stepped forward next. The pack has witnessed the bond forged. We have seen the strength you bring, Elara. Your quiet spirit will be a grounding force for our alpha, and your empathy, a balm for the pack. His words, though delivered with his usual gravity, carried a note of genuine approval. The dawn of a new era is upon us. May it be prosperous. A murmur of agreement rippled through the hall. Faces that had held apprehension now seemed to relax, replaced by expressions of acceptance and even a glimmer of hope. Elara felt a surge of something powerful within her, a quiet confidence she hadn't known she possessed. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges she couldn't yet comprehend, but she was not alone. She had Thorn, and she had the tentative, growing support of her pack. This wasn't merely a new role, it was a new purpose, a destiny she was beginning to embrace with thrilling curiosity. The old Elara, the overlooked sister, was fading, making way for the alpha female, ready to face the unfolding of her new life.